series called Challenging Beliefs. Last week we talked about the first two of Unity's 5 basic principles. And that was, there is only one presence and one power active as the universe and as my life, God the good. And we already spoke these principles this morning. And what I asked you to do last week was, I challenged you to go home and just take that one principle and write out what you really believe about God. Because in the process of writing it out, hopefully you would have gotten some insight into how you still have a tendency in your thought to think differently about God. Perhaps from childhood memories, perhaps from ages-long memories. But do these words ring true with you? And the other thing that I said about that is, this is Unity's basic premise. It rings true for some of us. It may not ring true for all of us. And what does truth mean? We talked about that a little bit in the class this morning. Truth is not the truth, and we all have to get on board to the truth. Truth is this idea that it is personal. What is true for you? What works for you in your mind? What holds you to knowing the experience of God, to feeling led by the experience of God? The second principle that we talked about was our essence is of God. Therefore, we are inherently good. This God essence was fully expressed in Jesus the Christ. We also talked about that a little bit in the class this morning. You see, this essence, we say, is fully expressed as Jesus the Christ. We are saying that Jesus was a man who fully embodied his Christ presence. But we are also creations of God. And Jesus said that we too could do what he did and more, which is saying that we are also the Christ. So often we will take these principles and we'll shorten them up. God is, I am. God is all. The Christ lives within me. I am the Christ because I am God's creation. You are the Christ because you are God's creation. So I don't know how many of you did your homework. I know at least one person did. Thank you, because I have heard back from that person. So we are taking last week from those first two, which everything, the other principles, everything in the other principles stands upon. Just like with the 10 Commandments. Everything stands upon those first 2 commandments. Love God with all your heart and soul, and then the second one is love others as you love yourself. The rest of the commandments can be done away with if you do those 2 things. And the same with these principles. If you believe that God is all in all, and that includes you, then the rest will follow. The work is easy. Now, when we talk about challenging beliefs, last week we talked about observing how some beliefs challenge us. This week we're going to talk more about how we are, or how we will challenge the beliefs that we have, those habits that we have formed from things that we have been told over days and years past, so that we can be more expansive in knowing the truth of who we are. Taken simply, I remember a day hundreds of years ago when people thought of the world as flat. And then somebody proved it was round. A belief was changed. And that was some way, is the way that it works for us in God. We believe up to a certain point, and we have an experience and we have an awareness, and then suddenly our beliefs are changed. Right here, right now, today, we have gone from that period of thinking that we lived in one universe. And scientists have found out that there are many universes out there. It's not many galaxies in one universe, but now it's many universes, because it just keeps on expanding. The more we become aware, the more it expands. And that's not only in the outer world that we live in, it is in our inner spiritual world. The more we open up to changing and challenging the beliefs that we have lived with, the greater the expansion and the more our awareness of a God that we can't understand becomes a little bit more useful and understandable to us. So let's move on to the third principle, which is we are co-creators with God, creating reality through thoughts held in mind. We are co-creators with God because God created us. And so that creation just goes on and on. Creating reality through thoughts held in mind. Thoughts held in mind, our mind. Now we know that we do this whether we're holding those thoughts in fear or thoughts in faith. Because if we're holding those thoughts in fear, what generally shows up in our life? Yeah, you got it. That thing that we feared the most ends up showing up there, doesn't it? And if we're holding it in faith, then what shows up in our life? You got it. The good shows up in our life. So when we hold these thoughts in mind, we're allowing God to express through us as the creator. Now when we're in self-will, we think that we're the creator. Instead of aligning our thoughts with God and getting our good, we get the other stuff. It's because our fear is not coming out of God. Our fear is coming out of our lesser selves. Dr. Ken Gordon says this. He says, we must surrender ourselves to spirit and not to our belief systems. So how often have you said, well, I believe it this way and I'm not going to change? And what happens is, somewhere along the line, push to shove, if we don't change and we're saying, but God help me, our higher selves will come to realize that there needs to be some change taking place. I love the slide that Alex chose for this morning of the butterflies. You know, if there's no change, we don't get butterflies. If we are willing to be transformed. Now the caterpillar does not know it's going to become a butterfly. It just becomes willing. It just listens to the fact it's time now to make a cocoon. Not knowing that it's going to emerge differently after the transformation. I want to talk to you a little bit about this idea of the prodigal son. There is a story of the prodigal son in the Bible. It's a parable that Jesus taught, and I'll use it for examples lots of times in lots of ways because it's rich. It's just plain rich. So when you think of the idea of the prodigal son, we know that every character in the Bible is a representation of us. There is the father, our higher selves. There is the son, the younger son. Get this, the younger son is the spiritual son, believe it or not. And there is the elder son. Well, the younger son comes to dad and says, hey, you know, I want my inheritance now. I'm ready to go out and live life. I'm tired of doing this work for you. I want to go out and see what life is all about. That's that part of us that says, yay, let's go explore, let's adventure. And then there is the son, the elder son. When I talk about the elder son, I'm talking about that idea within us that is the first of us, the material self, the one that's living in this day-to-day material world. And that material son says, I've got to do what I've been told to do. I've got to obey what needs to be obeyed. This is the way, and then I'll get my inheritance. You get it? It's going to work like a dog. And then maybe, just maybe, I'll earn my way to the heaven of it all. The prodigal son said, explore. Let me go explore it. So in that co-creation, the prodigal son is saying, let's see what I can do to bring out what's out there into a higher manifestation. Well, as often happens when we go out to explore our true selves, we find out that it's not what we expected. And as the prodigal son went out, he found out there was a famine out in the world. Things weren't as he expected. He used up his money on riotous living. He went out and enjoyed himself, but he enjoyed himself from the perspective of not knowing his truth yet. You see, in our spiritual selves, when we first newly get spiritual and say, let's go explore God, often we take that idea of co-creating with God to run in a little bit amok. It's like using wisdom without love, or love without wisdom. And so he just went out and just loved life, but didn't use any wisdom, and found that he was in a place where he wasn't having fun anymore. He used up everything. He used up everything. But the one thing he hadn't used up was he remembered his father. He remembered that's where his true gifts came from. And he said, even the servants got better than what I have here. I think I'll go home. I think I will humble myself and say I screwed up and go back and be as a servant. Well, in the story, Father comes out running when he sees his son coming home. And the Father within us, when he sees us acknowledging in humility that we are co-creators, not the creator, puts forth even more of that energy within ourselves so that we can bring out something greater. And so Father says to the servants, go, bring a robe, bring a ring, let's have a party. We're going to celebrate my child who was lost has come home. My child who was lost has come home. And so when we come into the Spirit truly ready to be co-creators with God, what happens is we find ourselves in a holy celebratory space of glory. We find out that the truth in the party is in the Spirit, not in this material world. But the rest of that story is from the son who stayed home, who comes to the Father and says, I won't be a part of it because you never threw a party for me and I stood here and worked hard for you. Oh, I worked so hard. No, where's my party? That part of us is looking for a party because we think we have to earn it. Because we don't believe just by being who we are spiritual beings, loses out every time. And what does the Father say to that son? The Father says to that son, all you have to do is ask. I never withhold. All you have to do is ask. So when we are in that place of being co-creators in mind, when we humble ourselves and say, so God within me, what is it that is mine to do right here, right now, in this moment, so that I feel happy, joyous, and free? Then we discover we can surrender to that Spirit, as Ken Gordon says, and not to our belief systems that we're not good enough, that we've run out of money, that whatever, because the Spirit of the Father within is always here to bring us up to that higher way of living. The second point that I want to make is to the fourth principle, which is through prayer and meditation, we align our heart-mind with God. Denials and affirmations are the tools we use. Through prayer and meditation, we align our heart-mind. Notice the words that were put in there by the powers to be that brought these principles together used heart mind, not mind. Wanted to make sure that we were bringing the love in with the wisdom and not trying to be in that place of intelligence of making it happen. For those of us who have a tendency to be slightly left-brained and trying to make everything happen, we need to remember that it is the heart part of us, that is that experience part of us that makes it happen. So, when we use prayer and meditation, what happens? Number one, we let go of the past. We let go of the future. We know it will always be there when we want to pick it up. We move into the present moment. It is in that awareness of the divine presence that we realize our God self and the truth of what we want to co-create. This is where we really define our truths, when we get in that quiet moment with ourselves. Now I know there are some of you out there who can't sit for a half hour or an hour or 2 hours or a day or 2 days to get that quietness. Quietness of spirit can come in walking. It can come in being totally engrossed in your creative moment, whatever that is, whether it's art, whether it's music, whether it is creative writing, whether it is crafting, whatever it is that you do creatively. When you get into that, as a runner would say, when you get into that zone where you're totally one, that's where your prayer and meditation is and works for you. That's not to say not to try the other. What is the difference between prayer and meditation? Well, I've heard lots of differences. You know, prayer is when we speak to God, meditation is when we listen to God. You know what? If we're speaking to our higher selves and we're saying a prayer, what are we doing? Yeah, we're meditating. We've come to that point of humility. That's what prayer and meditation is about. It's that point of surrender where we let go. Most of us don't go to prayer easily. Going back to that co-creating, we're still in the creating without the co-part before we release and surrender. And so prayer is that opportunity for us to remind ourselves of our higher selves. Prayer is that place where we totally surrender and let go. It is that moment of realizing that we do not believe in a changeable God. I don't think anybody in this room really believes in a changeable God. Some of us may occasionally still pray to a changeable God because it has been habituated in our thinking over years. But I don't believe any of us in this room now today believe in a changeable God. So when we go to prayer and meditation, the gift for us is to realize it is the power within that helps us change, and that power is unchangeable. I need to change in relation to my accepting and of these unchanging truths. I have to change in relation to my acceptance of the unchanging truth. If you ever find that when you're talking you say, yes, but, when you're talking about your beliefs and trying to make change or whatever's challenging you, and you go, yes, but, whenever you put that but there, where is your belief? It's not on the yes. You bring yourself up to the yes. When we talk about this idea of denials and affirmations, the idea of a denial is, again, in the material world, denial, you think, well, yeah, I'll just turn my back to this. That's a denial. This does not have power over me. That is a denial. The denial is simple and easy. It's not given the energy to it anymore. However, oftentimes, spirits in rebellion, which most of us people in unity are, a little bit of rebellion in us, who would say, oh, I don't have to worry about denial, let's get right to the affirmation. Well, the problem with doing that is like icing a cake that fell apart. If you go to the affirmation, you miss making the room to really let that affirmation ingrain in you, because the denial is a process of making the room. And finally, the last principle is through thoughts, words, and actions, we live the truth we know. When we say yes, but, we put ourselves in a place where we are holding on to our belief system. We aren't challenging it. When we say, yes, I am open, help me to see this differently, God. Whether your God has skin, whether your God is your internal God, help me to see this differently. Then we are allowing our experience and our truth to expand. So it is the truth that we know. The truth that we know today is not the truth we're going to know 10 years from now. It's not the truth we knew 10 years ago, because we are continuing to grow and evolve. Byron Katie, got it backwards here. Byron Katie said in her book, Loving What It Is, the truth that we know is what we have realized up to this point. She says, realization is not changing anything. Realization is that aha moment. It's coming to a new set of beliefs. She says, the world is as you perceive it. We've been working on the projected image for thousands of years and not on the projector. We're the projector. That's why life seems so chaotic. We're still out here trying to change all this instead of changing ourselves by becoming more spiritually attuned. And when we change ourselves and we're spiritually attuned, life just plain gets easier and life gets good. So is it challenge or is it acceptance? Well, we have to accept where we are before we can challenge it. We have to say, here it is. We have to accept it before we can challenge it. That's like trying to move into affirmation without doing the denial. Even though the denial is sweet and easy, and you don't have to say deny, you just have to move your energies. The process is you have to be there first. You have to know that's what you don't want before you can move into what you want. So in doing the work of loving what is, Byron Katie gives us a quick and easy, shouldn't say easy, I should say simple, a quick and simple way to go forward with this. And as we do, we can stay open to the inquiry of our beliefs. But the important thing is to notice our feelings, because as we live in this world, it's our feelings that hook us. It's our feelings that bring us back into this world. So she asked 4 questions, and the first question is it true? Is it true? In most cases, we will find if something is challenging us, it's because it is not true. The world is no longer flat. We just thought it was flat. Somebody is not picking on me. Somebody is given me a mirror of myself. So I can see what it is in me that's holding me back from being the best that I can be, from enjoying life totally free and easy. Can you absolutely know it's true? Now she put in the second question for a good reason, because we will go past it otherwise and say, sure, it's true. So the second question is, can you absolutely know it's true? In most cases, you can go, maybe I don't. Bless you. Maybe I don't know it's true. Maybe I think I'm thinking inside somebody's head. Maybe I've taken what I think somebody's thinking about me, and I've taken it on. It's not at all true. How many times have you had to go back and forgive yourself for moving into action thoughts, words, and actions, on a thought that you had or a word somebody said that you took the wrong way, that you perceived it differently than it was intended. So how do you react when you think that thought, the thought that you're trying to figure out whether it's true or isn't true? How do you react? Notice she used the word reaction too. Reaction is our feelings engaged because of our perceptions. How do you act? So, how do you act when you think that thought? Generally it could be, I act sad, I act angry, I act frustrated. Because normally we don't have to ask these questions if we're not being challenged. So if we're being challenged, we're probably in a place where we're not feeling comfortable. So our reactions are going to be out of not feeling comfortable. And then she says, who would you be without that thought? And this is where you start thinking about your good feelings and you change it around. And then she says, turn that statement around. Make it so that it's not about them, that it's about you, and you see the point. And you realize it wasn't the big deal you thought it was. So in this place you can create what you want to create with your thoughts, words, and actions from the truth that you know, and that is love, wisdom, peace, joy, freedom, the ability to relate in ways that lift instead of bring you down. Again, about what you perceive and you believe you can achieve. So challenge your perceptions, realize new beliefs, and choose to change your life experience. I did not read from the Bible yet. I did not choose to change the reading from last week because it's a good reading and we're still on the same thing, challenging beliefs. And it's a reading from chapter 7 of John where Jesus says, let anyone who is thirsty come to me, and let the one who believes in me drink. As the scripture has said, out of the believer's heart shall flow rivers of living water. So out of our hearts, when we believe the truth of who we are and we are willing to be open to be in the Christ individual we are, then those living waters, those ideas of life that are abundant show forth for us. My challenge for you this week is to do the work on what is challenging your emotions this week. Is it true? Is it really true? How do you feel when you think that thought? Who would you be if you didn't have that thought? Turn it around. So choose to be the truth of who you are, your higher self, your divinity, your Christ. To know the truth that you are God's beloved. You are the Christ, and all is well. God bless you.